Baek Joon stepped out of the car 3 blocks away from the market and told Daniel to wait. Daniel nodded without turning around, which was the kind of loyalty that came from 7 years of being paid well, and asked very few questions. Joon straightened the collar of the plain cotton shirt he was wearing, checked that his phone was the old model he kept specifically for occasions like this one, and started walking toward the noise and color of the open market ahead of him. He had done this before, twice. The first time was with a woman his mother had introduced him to at a charity dinner, a woman who had laughed too easily at everything he said until he showed up to their third meeting in a taxi instead of a car, and the laughing stopped. The second time was with someone Elias had insisted was different, and she was different. Just not in the way Elias meant. She had found his profile on a financial news site within 48 hours of meeting him and had started asking questions that were dressed up as curiosity but were really a form of arithmetic. He was not bitter about either of them. He understood the logic. He had money the way weather had pressure, and people felt it even when they could not name it. What he wanted was one person who could not feel it, one person who would respond to him and not to the atmosphere around him. So he had designed the experiment carefully this time. Old phone, plain clothes, cash only, no cologne that cost more than a market stall worker earned in a week. He had even borrowed the canvas bag from his building's maintenance supervisor, a man named Choi who had no idea his employer was the man who owned the building. The market was full in the way that only outdoor markets could be full. Bodies and sound and smell layered over each other until everything became one continuous living thing. Joon moved through it with his hands in his pockets, not looking for anything specific, just present, which was something he had to practice because his natural state was to be 3 steps ahead of whatever room he was in. He heard her before he saw her, not because she was loud. She was the opposite of loud. She was speaking at a perfectly controlled volume to a produce seller who was clearly used to winning these exchanges, and she was dismantling his pricing argument the way someone dismantles a poorly built structure, quietly, methodically from the base up. The exchange rate has been stable for 6 days, she said. I checked this morning. So the price difference between last week and today is not about the market, it is about this stall, and I am not saying that to be difficult. I am saying it because you are a good seller and I come here every week and I would like to keep coming here, but not if the price changes without a reason I can understand. The seller looked at her for a long moment. Then he adjusted the price. She thanked him the way people thank someone who has done something genuinely decent, not performed gratitude, real gratitude. And she turned to put the vegetables into the bag hanging from her shoulder. That was when Joon saw her fully. She was not what he expected, though he could not have said what he expected. She was tall, unhurried in the way she moved, with locks pinned away from her face except for a few that had escaped and fallen forward. She had the kind of features that came from 2 different worlds meeting and deciding to cooperate rather than compete. And on her hip, riding with complete confidence, was a small boy who was studying the market around him with an expression of profound seriousness that looked almost comic on a face that small. She turned to move to the next stall and nearly walked into Joon's chest. She stepped back cleanly. No stumble, no drama. Sorry, she said, and she was already moving. Something made him speak. He was not a man who spoke without a reason, but something made him do it. You were right about the exchange rate, he said. He was overcharging. She stopped. She turned halfway and looked at him with an expression that was polite and completely unimpressed at the same time. I know, she said. Ah, that is why I said it. The boy on her hip pointed one small finger directly at Joon and said, with great seriousness, Man! Yes, she said to the boy, without missing a beat. Well spotted. And she walked away. Joon stood in the middle of the market and watched her stop at the next stall, pick up a piece of fruit, smell it, put it back, pick up another one, and pay for it without a word of negotiation, because apparently that one had already earned its price. He stood there longer than he should have. Daniel was 3 blocks away. He had a board meeting the following morning that Claire had already rescheduled once. He had no logical reason to keep standing in a produce market watching a woman he did not know buy fruit. He found out her name the way he found out most things, by asking a simple question to the right person. The woman who sold woven bags near the far end of the market had seen her every Saturday for 2 years. Her name was Nala Kwon. She ran a nutrition practice out of a shared workspace near a shopping complex not far from where they were standing. The boy was her son. His name was Ren. He was 3 years old, and according to the bag seller, he had never once cried in this market, not even as an infant, which the bag seller seemed to regard as either a miracle or a warning. Nala Kwon, single mother, not looking for anything, had just walked away from Baek Joon without a single backwards glance. He went back to the car and told Daniel to drive home. Then he sat in the back seat for the entire ride without opening his phone, which was something he had not done in 4 years. When that night he told Elias over the phone that he had found someone interesting. Elias was quiet for a moment. Interesting how, he said. She argued a market seller down using macroeconomic data, June said. Another pause. June, Elias said carefully, that is either the best sign you have ever described to me, or you have been alone too long. Find out if there is a cafe near the workspace building on the east side of the main shopping complex, June said. I will pretend I am not concerned, Elias said, and hung up. There was a cafe. It was called Groundwork. It opened at 7:30, and it served coffee that the owner, Grace, roasted herself from beans her family grew, and it had 6 tables and no background music because Grace believed that noise was what cafes played when they had nothing else to offer. June was there at 7:50 on Monday morning with the second-hand laptop he had bought the previous afternoon and a coffee he paid for with cash, sitting at the corner table that had a clean line of sight to the door. Nala came in at 8:10 with Ren on her hip and a canvas tote over her shoulder that had a small tear near the left strap that she had stitched closed with thread that was almost but not quite the same color as the bag. June noticed this the way he noticed everything, not because he was looking for it, but because his mind collected details the way drains collected water. She settled Ren into a chair, gave him a small tablet with headphones that were sized for his tiny ears, ordered at the counter with the ease of someone who knew the menu without looking at it, and sat down by the window with a folder she opened immediately. She crossed something out on the first page, rewrote it, crossed it out again, made a sound that was not quite a sigh and not quite a decision, but lived somewhere between the two. Then she kept working. June looked at his laptop screen and read the same line of a document 4 times. This was already different from the other 2 times. In the other 2 times, he had felt like an observer watching a test subject. Right now, he felt like the one being observed, even though Nala Kwon had not looked in his direction once. He came back Tuesday. He came back Wednesday. Grace had started making his coffee when she saw him walk in, which meant he had already become a regular, which meant he had already made a small mistake in his cover. Sure, because regulars got remembered and remembered people got talked about, but he could not stop coming back, and that was a problem he had not built into the design of this experiment. On Wednesday, Ren's tablet slid off the table and crossed the cafe floor and stopped exactly at the foot of June's chair. June picked it up. The screen showed a nature documentary, a whale suspended mid-dive in dark water. He carried it to Ren's table and set it down in front of the boy without making it a moment. Ren looked at the tablet, looked at June, said, "Whale." "Very big one," June said. Nala looked up. She did the things she had done in the market, that full, unhurried assessment, like she was reading something written in small print. "Thank you," she said. "It is nothing," he said, and turned to go back. "You have been here every morning this week," she said. He turned back. "Good coffee." Grace spent 3 weeks learning the technique from a master roaster before she opened this place, Nala said. She told me she almost quit on day 11 because she could not get the temperature curve right. She went back on day 12. She paused. "I like knowing that about a place, that someone almost quit and did not." June looked at her for a moment. "Why does that matter to you?" "Because it means what you are drinking costs something real," she said, and she went back to her folder. He sat back down at his table and stared at his laptop and understood, with the particular clarity of a man who had spent years reading markets and people and risk, that the experiment had already stopped being an experiment. He just had not admitted it yet. And somewhere in the back of his mind, in the place where he kept the things he did not say out loud, a quieter and more dangerous thought was forming. Nala Kwon asked where things came from. She wanted to know what things had cost. She valued the almost quit, the struggle behind the result. When she found out what he had been doing, and she would find out because women like her always did, The question would not be whether she was angry. The question would be whether the thing he had built in secret was worth more or less than the truth he had hidden to build it. He did not have an answer yet, but he was coming back tomorrow, and that was already its own kind of answer. June was back at groundwork on Thursday at 7:50. Same corner table, same second-hand laptop. Number same coffee that Grace had already started making before he reached the counter. He paid, nodded his thanks, and sat down. He opened the laptop. He did not read anything on the screen. He was thinking about what Nala had said the previous morning, that she liked knowing something had cost something real. He had turned that sentence over in his mind through a board call with 3 senior executives, through a dinner he had attended alone, through the 40 minutes he lay awake at 1 in the morning staring at the ceiling of a bedroom that cost more to furnish than most people earned in 5 years. He had built an empire on the idea that value was provable, that numbers told truth better than people did. Foreign, and then a woman with a torn tote bag and a serious 3-year-old had said 11 words that made him feel like he had been measuring the wrong things. Nala came in at 8:14. Ren was not with her today. She was alone, and without the boy on her hip she moved differently. Not lighter exactly, but more contained. Like she was carrying the same weight internally instead of externally. She ordered, sat at the window table, and opened a different folder from the ones she had brought before. This one had sticky notes along the edges in 3 different colors, and she had a system for them that June could not decode from across the room, but could tell was a system and not chaos. She worked for 40 minutes without looking up. Then she closed the folder. Ma pressed both palms flat on the table for a moment like she was studying something, and looked out the window. He looked back at his screen. "Where is your work?" she said. He looked up. She was not looking at him. She was still looking out the window. "Sorry," he said. Now she looked at him. "You come here every morning with that laptop, and you open it and you sit in front of it, but I have never once seen you actually type anything. So I am asking where your work is, because it does not appear to be on the screen." June held her gaze. This was the moment in the experiment where he was supposed to have a clean, simple answer ready. Freelance consulting, independent projects, something vague and credible. He had rehearsed it, but sitting across a cafe from Nala Kwon, who had just caught him in a truth he had not offered, whether rehearsed answer felt like a used thing. "I think better when I'm out of my space," and he said, which was not a lie. "The screen is just something for my hands to do." She looked at him for another moment. "That is either very honest or very evasive," she said. "I cannot decide which." "Can it be both?" he said. Something shifted in her expression. Not a smile exactly, but the possibility of one. "My name is Nala," she said, and went back to her folder. "June," he said. She did not look up. "I know. Grace told me." He looked toward the counter where Grace was wiping down the espresso machine with her back to both of them. Grace, who roasted her own beans and had almost quit on day 11, and had told Nala his name without being asked. He made a note to himself that Grace was a more complex variable than he had accounted for. And by Friday they had exchanged exactly 43 words, not counting names. He knew this because he had counted, which was the kind of thing he did and had long stopped being embarrassed about. The 43 words were not romantic, were not weighted with anything obvious, were just the words of 2 people who existed in the same space and had decided independently that the other one was worth the minimum expenditure of language. But there was something in the quality of the silence between the words that was doing more work than the words themselves. And June could feel it the way you felt a current in water before you could see it moving. On Saturday, he went back to the market, not because he had planned to. He was in the area, which was something Daniel did not comment on, even though the area was 20 minutes out of the way from anywhere June needed to be that morning. He saw Nala at the grain stall with Ren walking beside her this time instead of riding on her hip. The boy was holding the edge of her dress with 2 fingers, not clutching, just connected. And he was watching everything with that same ancient seriousness that made June want to know what the child was thinking at all times. June bought a bag of ground pepper he did not need from a seller nearby, and watched her work through the market with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned that time was not abstract but actual, that every minute spent in the wrong direction was a minute taken from something that mattered. She saw him when she turned from the grain stall. While she did not look surprised, she looked like she was filing the information away. "You live near here?" she asked. "Not exactly," he said. But you were here last Saturday too, she said. Good market, he said. She looked at the bag of pepper in his hand. You cook? I try, he said. Another not a lie. He had a private chef named Mr. O who cooked everything in his house. But June had tried once, in university, to make kimchi jjigae from scratch. And it had been edible, technically. Nala looked at him the way she had looked at that piece of fruit the first day, that full assessment, unhurried, without apology. Then she said, Ren, say hello. Ren looked up at June. Hello, he said, with the gravity of someone addressing a committee. Hello, Ren, June said. Ren looked at the pepper bag. Spicy, he said. He is right, Nala said. That seller's pepper is extremely hot. Half of what you bought will last you a year. She shifted the grain bag to her other hand. Come, the vegetable seller 2 rows over has better value, and the pepper is milder. She did not wait for him to agree. She just started walking, and Ren fell back into his 2-fingered hold on her dress, and June followed them through the market for 20 minutes, while Nala moved through each stall with the precision of someone who had learned the difference between price and value long before it became a philosophy. He carried her bags when they got heavy. She led him without making it romantic or significant. It was just a practical decision, which made it mean more than if she had made it into something. When they reached the market exit, she took the bags from him with a clean, simple thank you. No lingering, no performance. You are here every Saturday? He asked. Every Saturday, she confirmed. Then I will see you, he said. She looked at him once more with that reading expression. Maybe, she said, and walked away with Ren at her side. June stood at the edge of the market and felt something he had not felt in a long time. The particular discomfort of not knowing what came next. He built companies. He read futures. He had not been uncertain about a next step since he was 22 years old and standing in a bank with a proposal no one wanted to fund. He had walked out of that bank and funded it himself. But there was no version of self-funding what was happening here. This required something he had left unpracticed for so long he was no longer sure he had it. He called Elias on the drive back. She let me carry her market bag, he said. Elias was quiet for 3 seconds. June, are you hearing yourself? She did not ask me, she just let me. When they got heavy, she just allowed it without making it a thing. And this is significant to you. Yes, because a woman let you carry vegetables. Because she assessed whether I was worth trusting with something small and decided yes, June said. She does not do anything without deciding first. So the fact that she decided means something. Elias was quiet again for longer this time. How long are you planning to keep the cover? He said finally. June did not answer right away. Outside the window, the city moved past in its usual Friday energy. Wave market traders, school traffic, a woman selling chilled water from a cooler balanced on her head, with the kind of effortless precision that always made him think about how much skill the world kept in plain sight. Until I know it is real, he said. And when does that happen? I will know, Yoon said. Elias made a sound that was not quite agreement and not quite argument. Victor called this morning, he said, switching subjects with the practiced ease of a man who had been June's closest friend for 14 years and knew when to stop pushing. The Meridian deal has a new complication. I need you in the office Monday morning, fully yourself, not market bag, June. I will be there, June said. He hung up and looked out the window and thought about what Elias had just said. Fully yourself. As if the man carrying pepper and following a woman through a produce market was somehow less himself than the man who sat at the head of a boardroom table and moved numbers that moved industries. He was not sure that was true. He was not sure which version of himself was the performance and which one was the thing underneath. What he was sure of was that Nala Kwon had said maybe with the specific weight of a woman who had been disappointed before and had decided that maybe was the most honest thing she could offer. He could work with maybe. Maybe was not a door closed. Maybe was a door that required the right kind of patience, the kind that did not perform itself, the kind that just showed up on Saturday with nothing to prove and let things be what they were. What he had not calculated was that while he was learning her, someone else was already watching him. Not Nala, not Elias. Someone who had recognized the second-hand laptop and the scuffed sneakers and the cash payments for exactly what they were. A man hiding in plain sight, and who had their own very specific reasons for wanting to know why. that someone had been sitting 3 tables away from him in groundwork every morning that week, behind a newspaper and a barley tea, and June had not noticed once. That was the first real mistake of the experiment. And in June's experience, first mistakes never arrived alone. June arrived at groundwork on Monday morning, and the corner table was taken. He stood at the counter waiting for Grace to finish his coffee and scanned the room with the habit of someone who assessed spaces before entering them fully. And that was when he saw it. The table where the stranger had been sitting every morning last week was empty today, but the chair was angled outward slightly, like someone had left in a hurry, and there was a ring on the table from a barley tea glass that Grace had not wiped yet. Small detail, the kind of detail that meant nothing to most people and everything to June. He sat at the next available table and opened his laptop and did not read anything on the screen. Nala came in at 8:12. Ren was with Sophie today, which June had learned meant Nala had back-to-back client sessions in the morning and needed her hands and her attention completely free. She ordered, sat down, opened her folder, and then looked up at him directly, which she had never done first before. "You look like something is wrong," she said. He looked at her. "Sure, do I?" "You have been staring at the same spot on that table since I walked in," she said. "You are not thinking about whatever is on that screen. You are thinking about something else entirely." He could have deflected. He had a full toolkit of deflections, built from years of boardrooms and negotiations, where showing your actual thought was the same as showing your hand. But something about the way she said it, plainly, without drama, like she was simply reporting what she saw, made the deflection feel like the wrong currency. "Someone has been sitting in this cafe every morning last week," he said, "behind a newspaper. I did not pay attention at the time, but I am paying attention now, and I do not like what it adds up to." Nala looked at him steadily. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" "No," he said. Then more honestly, I do not know." She held his gaze for a moment. "That is a very different answer from the first one," she said. "I know," he said. She went back to her folder, but the quality of her silence had changed. It was not closed. It was the silence of someone who had filed something important and was leaving the drawer open. He called Elias from the car after and described the table, the angle of the chair, the barley tea ring. Elias listened without interrupting, which meant he was taking it seriously. "I will have James run a check on everyone who has been in that cafe in the last week," Elias said. "Grace has a security camera above the counter. Small one. I noticed it when I came in last Thursday to check the place before you started going." June went still. "You came to check the cafe. You are worth $400 million, and you were about to start going to an unknown location alone every morning in plain clothes with no security," Elias said. "Of course I checked the cafe. James has been 2 streets away every morning you have been there. Did you think I just let you do this completely unwatched?" June did not answer because the honest answer was yes. He had thought exactly that. And the fact that he had been wrong was sitting uncomfortably alongside the fact that he had accused Nala, in his mind, of being perceptive, while he himself had missed the most obvious thing. The footage came back by Wednesday evening. Claire sent it to his encrypted phone with a message that said only, "You need to see this." The man in the footage was not a stranger to June. His name was David Seo, and he was the personal consultant and closest ally of June's older cousin, Minho, who had been contesting the board seat that June's late father had left to June instead of to Minho, who believed seniority of blood outweighed merit in matters of inheritance. The legal challenge had been ongoing for 2 years. June had won every round. Minho had not stopped trying. David Seo had been sitting in groundwork watching June perform a version of himself that had no money attached to it, and he had been photographing it, and June did not need to be told what those photographs were for. Minho was building a case that June was unstable, erratic, a man who dressed in second-hand clothes and frequented market stalls and could not be trusted to steward a company of that size. It was thin. It was desperate. But desperate people with good lawyers could make thin arguments last long enough to do damage. He sat with this information for 1 full day without telling anyone except Elias and James. Then he made a decision that surprised even himself. He was going to tell Nala. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. Because the alternative was that she found out from someone else, in a worse way, at a worse time, and that was a version of events he could not allow. Not because of the experiment. The experiment was over. He knew that now with the clarity of someone who had been pretending to test something while the real thing was happening underneath, quiet and ungoverned and entirely out of his control. He went to the market on Saturday. She was at the grain stall with Ren walking beside her, two fingers on the edge of her dress. Ajun bought nothing from any seller. He walked directly to where she was standing and waited until she had finished her transaction and turned around. She saw his face and knew immediately. "What happened?" she said. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Not here. Can we sit somewhere?" She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at Ren. Ren looked up at June with his permanent expression of serious evaluation. Then Ren looked back at his mother and said with complete conviction, "Good." Nala looked at her son for a beat. Then she picked up her bag. "There is a bench near the far entrance," she said. "Ren can watch the pigeons." They sat on the bench with Ren standing a few feet away, monitoring the pigeons with intense focus, and June told her. He did not dress it up, and he did not minimize it. Or he told her that he was not who he had presented himself to be, that he had money, significant money, that the plain clothes and the old phone and the cash payments were deliberate, that he had done it before with other women and it had never worked, and that he had kept doing it with her long past the point where it was still an experiment because he had not wanted to break the thing that was forming between them by introducing the thing that had broken everything before. He told her about Minho and David Seo and the photographs. He told her that someone had been watching them and that she deserved to know before it became something she found out in a way he could not control. Then he stopped talking and let the silence be what it was. Nala sat with her hands folded in her lap and looked at the pigeons for a long time. Ren had crouched down and was now at eye level with the nearest one, studying it with the patience of a scientist. "How much money?" she said finally. He told her. She nodded slowly, the way she nodded when she was processing information rather than reacting to it. "And the other women," she said, "what did they do when you showed up in the taxi instead of the car?" "Lost interest," he said. "And you thought I would be different because I argued about exchange rates in a market," she said. It was not a question. It had an edge in it that he deserved. "I thought you might be different," he said. "I did not know. That is why I stayed." "But you kept lying to me to find out," she said. "Yes," he said. No qualifier, no softening, just yes. She was quiet again. A pigeon landed 2 feet from Ren, and Ren did not move, just watched it, somewhat, and it watched him back. "I have a son," Nala said. "I do not have the luxury of romantic experiments. Every person I allow near him costs something. My time, his attachment, the part of me that has to explain to a 3-year-old why someone who was here is now not here." She paused. "Ren does not warm to people. You may have noticed. He assessed you for 2 full weeks before he said hello in the market. When he said good just now, that is not a small thing. That child does not spend words." June looked at Ren, who had now extended one finger toward the pigeon and was waiting with absolute patience to see if it would come closer. "I know I do not have the right to ask you to overlook what I did," June said. "I am not asking that. I am asking for the chance to be the actual thing instead of the version I constructed. Because the actual thing is not that different. I think better outside my space. I pay attention to how people treat market sellers. I find your son's approach to pigeons genuinely admirable." He stopped. "But I also own companies, and I have a driver, and I have a cousin who is currently trying to use photographs of me carrying your grocery bags to argue I am unfit to run a board. And you deserve to know all of that before you decide anything." Nala turned and looked at him fully. That reading look, the mango look, the whole weight of her attention on him like a hand pressing flat on a page to feel whether what was written there was real. "The torn strap on my bag," she said. "I stitched it with the wrong color thread. You noticed it the first week. I saw you notice it." He had not known she had seen that. "Yes," he said. "Colonel, why did you not say anything?" "Because it was not mine to say anything about," he said. "You had already decided the bag was worth keeping. That was your decision." Something moved across her face. Not the possibility of a smile this time. The actual thing, brief and unguarded, and more valuable to him in that moment than anything he had built or bought or argued for in a boardroom. She looked back at the pigeons. Ren had given up on the extended finger and was now simply sitting cross-legged on the ground at eye level with the birds, coexisting with them, which seemed to be working better. I am not easy, she said. I need you to understand that clearly. And I have a child and a practice I built from nothing, and a sister who will interrogate you for 3 hours the first time she meets you, and a best friend who will do background checks for sport. I do not do things halfway, and I do not forgive dishonesty quickly. I know, he said. You do not know yet, she said, but you could. She stood up, brushing the back of her dress flat with both hands. Ren, she called. Time. Ren stood up from the ground, gave the pigeons one final look of acknowledgement, and walked back to his mother. He stopped in front of June and looked up at him. Pigeon, he said, pointing back at the birds. Good ones, June said. Ren nodded as if this confirmed something he had suspected, took 2 fingers of his mother's hand, and they began to walk toward the market exit. June stood up from the bench. Wait, Sunday, Nala said without turning around. There is a place near my office that does proper brunch. Grace told me you tip well, which means you have either been lying about having money or you are the most generous broke man she has ever served. She glanced back at him once. Come as yourself this time. He watched her walk away with Ren at her side, the torn strap on her bag stitched with the wrong color thread, the grain she had bought sitting heavy in the bag she carried without complaint, and he thought about what Elias had said. Fully yourself. He thought he was beginning to understand what that meant. He had spent years building a test to protect himself from being chosen for the wrong reasons. And he had never once considered that the real risk was not being chosen for the wrong reasons, but being too hidden to be chosen at all. Nala had not passed his test. She had made it irrelevant. She had simply been so completely and precisely herself that there was no version of the experiment that could contain her. And he had followed her through a market and into a cafe and onto a bench by a pigeon-filled entrance and told her the truth. Not because the test was complete, but because she had made him understand that the truth was the only thing that had ever been worth offering. What he did not know yet, what he would find out 3 days later when Elias called with the information James had finished compiling, was that David's CO had not been working alone. Someone had told Minho where to look. Someone who knew Jun's habits. His patterns, the specific shape of the experiment he had run twice before. Someone who had access to the kind of detail that only came from being trusted. The call came on Tuesday night. June was at his desk reviewing the Meridian documents when his phone lit up with Elias's name. The leak, Elias said without greeting. It was not from our side. Then whose side? June said. Elias was quiet for 1 second. It was Sandra, he said. Nala's best friend. Minho found her 6 weeks ago. She has been feeding him information about Nala's routine, the market, the cafe, everything. She did not know about you specifically at first. She thought she was helping someone investigate a business matter. But she kept going after she found out. June sat very still. Nala does not know, Elias said. The room was quiet. Outside, the city moved through its Tuesday night without knowing that somewhere in it, a woman who had just agreed to brunch with a man who had lied to her was about to find out that the person she had trusted longest had been the first betrayal in a story she thought she was only just beginning. June picked up his phone. He put it down. He picked it up again. This was the part of the experiment he had never designed for, because he had never designed for the possibility that the test would stop being about him. That the person who needed protecting was not himself and his money and his carefully constructed cover story, but a woman on a bench who had said, I do not forgive dishonesty quickly, while her son made peace with pigeons, and who deserved to hear what was coming from him before it arrived from anywhere else. And he called her at 9:47 on a Tuesday night. She answered on the third ring. June, she said, and in the single word he could hear that she already knew something was wrong, because she was the kind of woman who heard the shape of things before they were spoken. I need to tell you something, he said, and I need you to hear it from me first. The silence that followed was the longest of the entire story, longer than the market, longer than the cafe, longer than the bench. It was the silence of someone standing at the edge of something and deciding whether the ground on the other side was solid enough to hold. Tell me, she said, and he did.